Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, translated by Constance Garrett. Heavens, Donya! Pulcheria Alexandrovna began as soon as they were in the street. I really feel relieved myself at coming away, more at ease. How little did I think yesterday in the train that I could ever be glad of that. I tell you again, mother, he is still very ill. Don't you see it? Perhaps worrying about us upset him. We must be patient, and much can be forgiven. Well, you were not very patient. Pulcheria Alexandrovna caught her up, hotly and jealously. Do you know, Donya, I was looking at you too. You are the very portrait of him, and not so much in face as in soul. You are both melancholy, both morose and hot tempered, both haughty and both generous. Surely he can't be an egoist, Donya, eh? When I think of what is in store for us this evening, my heart sinks. Don't be uneasy, mother. What must be, will be. Donya, only think what a position we're in. What if Pyotr Petrovitch breaks it off? Poor Pulcheria Alexandrovna blurted out incautiously. He won't be worth much if he does, answered Donya sharply and contemptuously. We did well to come away. Pulcheria Alexandrovna hurriedly broke in. He was in a hurry about some business or other. If he gets out and has a breath of air, it is fearfully close in his room. But where is one to get a breath of air here? The very streets here feel like shut up rooms. Good heavens, what a town! Stay this side. They will crush you carrying something. Why, it is a piano they have got. I declare how they push. I am very much afraid of that young woman, too. What young woman, mother? Why, that Sofia Yanovna, who was there just now. Why? I have a presentiment, Donya. Well, you may believe it or not, but as soon as she came in, that very minute, I felt that she was the chief cause of the trouble. Nothing of the sort, cried Donya in vexation. What nonsense! With your presentiments, mother, he only made her acquaintance the evening before, and he did not know her when she came in. Well, you will see. She worries me, but you will see. You will see. I was so frightened. She was gazing at me with those eyes. I could scarcely sit still in my chair when he began introducing her. Do you remember? It seems so strange, but Pyotr Petrovitch writes like that about her, and he introduces her to us, to you. So he must think a great deal of her. People will write anything. We were talked about and written about too. Have you forgotten? I'm sure that she is a good girl and that it is all nonsense. God grant it may be. And Pyotr Petrovitch is a contemptible slanderer. Donya snapped out suddenly. Pulcheria Alexandrovna was crushed. The conversation was not resumed. I will tell you what I want with you, said Raskolnikov, drawing Razumihin to the window. Then I will tell Katerina Ivanovna that you are coming, Sonia said hurriedly, preparing to depart. 1 minute, Sofia Semyonovna, have no secrets. You are not in our way. I want to have another word or two with you. Listen. He turned suddenly to Razumihin again. You know that. What's his name? Porfiry Petrovitch. I should think so. He is a relation. Why? Added the latter with interest. Is he managing that case? You know, about that murder. You were speaking about it yesterday. Yes, well, Razumihin's eyes opened wide. He was inquiring for people who had pawned things, and I have some pledges there too. Trifles. A ring my sister gave me as a keepsake when I left home, and my father's silver watch. They are only worth 5 or 6 rubles altogether, but I value them. So, what am I to do now? I do not want to lose the things, especially the watch. I was quaking just now for fear mother would ask to look at it when we spoke of Donya's watch. It is the only thing of father's left us. She would be ill if it were lost. You know what women are. So tell me what to do. I know I ought to have given notice at the police station, but would it not be better to go straight to Porphyry, eh? What do you think? The matter might be settled more quickly. See, mother may ask for it before dinner. Certainly not to the police station. Certainly to Porphyry. Razumihin shouted in extraordinary excitement. Well, how glad I am. Let us go at once. It is a couple of steps. We shall be sure to find him. Very well, let us go. And he will be very, very glad to make your acquaintance. I have often talked to him of you at different times. I was speaking of you yesterday. Let us go. So you knew the old woman. So that's it. It is all turning out splendidly. Oh, yes, Sofia Ivanovna. Sofia Semyonovna, corrected Raskolnikov. Sofia Semyonovna. This is my friend Razumihin, and he is a good man. If you have to go now, Sonia was beginning, not looking at Razumihin at all, and still more embarrassed. Let us go, decided Raskolnikov. I will come to you today, Sofia Semyonovna. Only tell me where you live. He was not exactly ill at ease, but seemed hurried and avoided her eyes. Sonia gave her address and flushed as she did so. They all went out together. Don't you lock up? Asked Razumihin, following him onto the stairs. Never, answered Raskolnikov. I have been meaning to buy a lock for these 2 years. People are happy who have no need of locks, he said, laughing to Sonia. They stood still in the gateway. Do you go to the right, Sofia Semyonovna? How did you find me, by the way? He added as though he wanted to say something quite different. He wanted to look at her soft, clear eyes, but this was not easy. Why, you gave your address to Polenka yesterday. Polenka? Oh, yes, Polenka. That is the little girl. She's your sister. Did I give her the address? Why? Had you forgotten? No, no, I remember. I had heard my father speak of you, only I did not know your name and he did not know it. And now I came. And as I had learnt your name, I asked today, where does Mr. Raskolnikov live? I did not know you had only a room too. Goodbye. I will tell Katerina Ivanova. She was extremely glad to escape at last. She went away looking down, hurrying to get out of sight as soon as possible, to walk the 20 steps to the turning on the right and to be at last alone. And then moving rapidly along, looking at no one, noticing nothing, to think, to remember, to meditate on every word, every detail. Never, never had she felt anything like this. Dimly and unconsciously, a whole new world was opening before her. She remembered suddenly that Raskolnikov meant to come to her that day, perhaps at once. Only not today, please, not today. She kept muttering with a sinking heart, as though entreating someone like a frightened child. Mercy to me, to that room. He will see, oh dear. She was not capable at that instant of noticing an unknown gentleman who was watching her and following at her heels. He had accompanied her from the gateway. At the moment when Razumihin, Raskolnikov, and she stood still at parting on the pavement, this gentleman, who was just passing, started on hearing Sonia's words. And I asked where Mr. Raskolnikov lived. He turned a rapid but attentive look upon all three, especially upon Raskolnikov, to whom Sonia was speaking, then looked back and noted the house. All this was done in an instant as he passed, and trying not to betray his interest, he walked on more slowly as though waiting for something. He was waiting for Sonia. He saw that they were parting and that Sonia was going home. Home? Where? I've seen that face somewhere, he thought. I must find out. At the turning, he crossed over, looked round, and saw Sonia coming the same way, noticing nothing. She turned the corner. He followed her on the other side. After about 50 paces, he crossed over again, overtook her, and kept 2 or 3 yards behind her. He was a man about 50, rather tall and thickly set, with broad, high shoulders which made him look as though he stooped a little. He wore good and fashionable clothes and looked like a gentleman of position. He carried a handsome cane, which he tapped on the pavement at each step. His gloves were spotless. He had a broad, rather pleasant face with high cheekbones and a fresh color, not often seen in Petersburg. His flaxen hair was still abundant and only touched here and there with grey, and his thick square beard was even lighter than his hair. His eyes were blue and had a cold and thoughtful look. His lips were crimson. He was a remarkably well preserved man and looked much younger than his years. When Sonia came out on the canal bank, they were the only two persons on the pavement. He observed her dreaminess and preoccupation. On reaching the house where she lodged, Sonia turned in at the gate. He followed her, seeming rather surprised. In the courtyard, she turned to the right corner. Bah, muttered the unknown gentleman and mounted the stairs behind her. Only then Sonia noticed him. She reached the third story, turned down the passage, and rang at number 9. On the door was inscribed in chalk, Kapernaumov, tailor. Bah! The stranger repeated again, wondering at the strange coincidence, and he rang next door at the number 8. The doors were 2 or 3 yards apart. You lodge at Kapernaumov's, he said, looking at Sonia and laughing. He altered a waistcoat for me yesterday. I am staying close here at Madame Rezelik's. How odd. Sonia looked at him attentively. We are neighbors, he went on gaily. I only came to town the day before yesterday. Goodbye for the present. Sonia made no reply. The door opened and she slipped in. She felt for some reason ashamed and uneasy. On the way to Porphyry's, Razumihin was obviously excited. That's capital, brother, he repeated several times, and I am glad. What are you glad about? Raskolnikov thought to himself. I didn't know that you pledged things at the old woman's too. And was it long ago? Was it long since you were there? What a simple hearted fool he is. When was it? Raskolnikov stopped still to recollect. 2 or 3 days before her death, it must have been. But I'm not going to redeem the things now, he put in with a sort of hurried and conspicuous solicitude about the things. I've not more than a silver ruble left after last night's accursed delirium. He laid special emphasis on the delirium. Yes, yes, Razumihin hastened to agree with what was not clear. Then that's why you were struck, partly. You know, in your delirium, you were continually mentioning some rings or chains. Yes, yes, that's clear. It's all clear now. Hullo, how that idea must have got about among them. Here this man will go to the stake for me, and I find him delighted at having it cleared up why I spoke of rings in my delirium. What a hold the idea must have on all of them. Shall we find him? He asked suddenly. Oh, yes, Resumehin answered quickly. He is a nice fellow. You will see, brother. Rather clumsy, that is to say, he is a man of polished manners, but mean clumsy in a different sense. He is an intelligent fellow, very much so indeed, but he has his own range of ideas. He is incredulous, skeptical, cynical. He likes to impose on people, or rather, to make fun of them. His is the old circumstantial method, but he understands his work thoroughly. Last year, he cleared up a case of murder in which the police had hardly a clue. He is very, very anxious to make your acquaintance. On what grounds is he so anxious? Oh, it's not exactly. You see, since you've been ill, I happen to have mentioned you several times. So when he heard about you, about your being a law student and not able to finish your studies, he said, "What a pity." And so I concluded from everything together, not only that, yesterday, Zametov, Rodya, I talked some nonsense on the way home to you yesterday when I was drunk. I'm afraid, brother, of your exaggerating it, you see. What? That they think I am a madman. Maybe they are right, he said with a constrained smile. Yes, yes, that is. Pooh, no. But all that I said, and there was something else too. It was all nonsense, drunken nonsense. But why are you apologizing? I am so sick of it all. Raskolnikov cried with exaggerated irritability. It was partly assumed, however. I know, I understand. Believe me, I understand. One's ashamed to speak of it. If you are ashamed, then don't speak of it. Both were silent. Razumihin was more than ecstatic, and Raskolnikov perceived it with repulsion. He was alarmed too by what Razumihin had just said about Porfiry. I shall have to pull a long face with him too, he thought with a beating heart, and he turned white. And do it naturally too. But the most natural thing would be to do nothing at all. Carefully do nothing at all. No, carefully would not be natural again. Oh well, we shall see how it turns out. We shall see. Directly. Is it a good thing to go or not? The butterflies to the light. My heart is beating. That's what's bad. In this grey house, said Resumehin, the most important thing, does Porphyry know that I was at the old hag's flat yesterday and asked about the blood? I must find that out instantly as soon as I go in. Find out from his face. Otherwise, I'll find out if it's my ruin. I say, brother, he said suddenly, addressing Resumehin with a sly smile. I have been noticing all day that you seem to be curiously excited. Isn't it so? Excited? Not a bit of it, said Resumehin, stung to the quick. Yes, brother, I assure you it's noticeable. Why, you sat on your chair in the way you never do sit, on the edge somehow, and you seemed to be writhing all the time. You kept jumping up for nothing. One moment you were angry, and the next your face looked like a sweetmeat. You even blushed, especially when you were invited to dinner. You blushed awfully. Nothing of the sort. Nonsense. What do you mean? But why are you wriggling out of it like a schoolboy? By Jove! There, he's blushing again. What a pig you are! But why are you so shamefaced about it? Romeo, stay. I'll tell of you today. I'll make mother laugh and someone else too. Listen, listen, this is serious. What next? You find Resumehin was utterly overwhelmed, turning cold with horror. What will you tell them? Come, brother. Fool. What a pig you are. You are like a summer rose, and if only you knew how it suits you. A Romeo over 6 foot high, And how you've washed today. You cleaned your nails, I declare, eh? That's something unheard of. Why, I do believe you've got pomatum on your hair. Bend down. Pig. Raskolnikov laughed as though he could not restrain himself. So, laughing, they entered Porfiry Petrovich's flat. This is what Raskolnikov wanted. From within, they could be heard laughing as they came in, still guffawing in the passage. Not a word here, or I'll brain you, Razumihin whispered ferociously, seizing Raskolnikov by the shoulder. Chapter 5. Raskolnikov was already entering the room. He came in looking as though he had the utmost difficulty not to burst out laughing again. Behind him, Razumihin strode in cocky and awkward, shamefaced and red as a peony, with an utterly crestfallen and ferocious expression. His face and whole figure really were ridiculous at that moment and amply justified Raskolnikov's laughter. Raskolnikov, not waiting for an introduction, bowed to Porfiry Petrovitch, who stood in the middle of the room looking inquiringly at them. He held out his hand and shook hands, still apparently making desperate efforts to subdue his mirth and utter a few words to introduce himself. But he had no sooner succeeded in assuming a serious air and muttering something when he suddenly glanced again as though accidentally at Razumihin and could no longer control himself. His stifled laughter broke out the more irresistibly the more he tried to restrain it. The extraordinary ferocity with which Razumihin received this spontaneous mirth gave the whole scene the appearance of most genuine fun and naturalness. Razumihin strengthened this impression as though on purpose. Fool, you fiend, he roared, waving his arm, which at once struck a little round table with an empty tea glass on it. Everything was sent flying and crashing. But why break chairs, gentlemen? You know it's a loss to the crown, Porfiry Petrovitch quoted gaily. Raskolnikov was still laughing, with his hand in Porfiry Petrovitch's, but anxious not to overdo it. Awaited the right moment to put a natural end to it. Razumihin, completely put to confusion by upsetting the table and smashing the glass, gazed gloomily at the fragments, cursed and turned sharply to the window where he stood, looking out with his back to the company with a fiercely scowling countenance, seeing nothing. Porfiry Petrovitch laughed and was ready to go on laughing, but obviously looked for explanations. Zametov had been sitting in the corner, but he rose at the visitor's entrance and was standing in expectation with a smile on his lips, though he looked with surprise and even, it seemed, incredulity at the whole scene and at Raskolnikov with a certain embarrassment. Zametov's unexpected presence struck Raskolnikov unpleasantly. I've got to think of that, he thought. Excuse me, please, he began, affecting extreme embarrassment. Raskolnikov. Not at all. Very pleasant to see you. And how pleasantly you've come in. Why, won't he even say good morning? Porfiry Petrovitch nodded at Razumihin. Upon my honor, I don't know why he is in such a rage with me. I only told him as we came along that he was like Romeo and proved it. And that was all, I think. Pig, ejaculated Razumihin without turning around. There must have been very grave grounds for it, if he is so furious at the word. Porfiry laughed. Oh, you sharp lawyer! Damn you all! Snapped Razumihin and suddenly bursting out laughing himself. He went up to Porfiry with a more cheerful face as though nothing had happened. That'll do. We are all fools. To come to business, this is my friend Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. In the first place, he has heard of you and wants to make your acquaintance. And secondly, he has a little matter of business with you. Zametov, what brought you here? Have you met before? Have you known each other long? What does this mean? Thought Raskolnikov uneasily. Zametov seemed taken aback, but not very much so. Why, it was at your rooms we met yesterday, he said easily. Then I have been spared the trouble. All last week he was begging me to introduce him to you. Porfiry and you have sniffed each other out without me. Where is your tobacco? Porfiry Petrovitch was wearing a dressing gown, very clean linen, and trodden down slippers. He was a man of about 5 and 30, short, stout, even to corpulence, and clean shaven. He wore his hair cut short and had a large round head, particularly prominent at the back. His soft, round, rather snub nosed face was of a sickly yellowish color and had a vigorous and rather ironical expression. It would have been good natured except for a look in his eyes, which shone with a watery, mawkish light under almost white, blinking eyelashes. The expression of those eyes was strangely out of keeping with his somewhat womanish figure and gave it something far more serious than could be guessed at first sight. As soon as Porfiry Petrovitch heard that his visitor had a little matter of business with him, he begged him to sit down on the sofa and sat down himself on the other end, waiting for him to explain his business with that careful and over serious attention which is at once oppressive and embarrassing, especially to a stranger, and especially if what you are discussing is, in your opinion, of far too little importance for such exceptional solemnity. But in brief and coherent phrases, Raskolnikov explained his business clearly and exactly, and was so well satisfied with himself that he even succeeded in taking a good look at Porfiry. Porfiry Petrovitch did not once take his eyes off him. Razumihin, sitting opposite at the same table, listened warmly and impatiently, looking from one to the other every moment with rather excessive interest. Fool, Raskolnikov swore to himself. You have to give information to the police, Porfiry replied with a most businesslike air, that having learnt of this incident, that is, of the murder, you beg to inform the lawyer in charge of the case that such and such things belong to you, and that you desire to redeem them, or but they will write to you. That's just the point. That at the present moment, Raskolnikov tried his utmost to feign embarrassment. I'm not quite in funds, and even this trifling sum is beyond me. I only wanted to see you for the present to declare that the things are mine and that when I have money. That's no matter, answered Porfiry Petrovitch, receiving his explanation of his pecuniary position coldly. But you can, if you prefer, write straight to me to say that having been informed of the matter and claiming such and such as your property, you beg. On an ordinary sheet of paper, Raskolnikov interrupted eagerly, again interested in the financial side of the question. Oh, the most ordinary. And suddenly, Porfiry Petrovitch looked with obvious irony at him, screwing up his eyes and, as it were, winking at him. But perhaps it was Raskolnikov's fancy, for it all lasted but a moment. There was certainly something of the sort. Raskolnikov could have sworn he winked at him. Goodness knows why. He knows, flashed through his mind like lightning. Forgive my troubling you about such trifles, he went on, a little disconcerted. The things are only worth 5 rubles, but I prize them particularly for the sake of those from whom they came to me. And I must confess that I was alarmed when I heard. That's why you were so much struck when I mentioned to Zosimov that Porphyry was inquiring for everyone who had pledges. Razumihin put in with obvious intention. This was really unbearable. Raskolnikov could not help glancing at him with a flash of vindictive anger in his black eyes, but immediately recollected himself. You seem to be jeering at me, brother, he said to him with a well feigned irritability. I dare say I do not seem to you absurdly anxious about such trash, but you mustn't think me selfish or grasping for that. And these two things may be anything but trash in my eyes. I told you just now that the silver watch, though it's not worth a cent, is the only thing left us of my father's. You may laugh at me, but my mother is here. He turned suddenly to Porphyry, and if she knew, he turned again hurriedly to Razumihin, carefully making his voice tremble. That the watch was lost, she would be in despair. You know what women are. Not a bit of it. I didn't mean that at all. Quite the contrary, shouted Razumihin, distressed. Was it right? Was it natural? Did I overdo it? Raskolnikov asked him in a tremor. Why did I say that about women? Oh, your mother is with you, Porfiry Petrovitch inquired. Yes. When did she come? Last night. Porfiry paused as though reflecting. Your things would not in any case be lost. He went on calmly and coldly. I have been expecting you here for some time. And as though that was a matter of no importance, he carefully offered the ashtray to Razumihin, who was ruthlessly scattering cigarette ash over the carpet. Raskolnikov shuddered, but Porfiry did not seem to be looking at him and was still concerned with Razumihin's cigarette. What? Expecting him? Why? Did you know that he had pledges there? Cried Razumihin. Porfiry Petrovitch addressed himself to Raskolnikov. Your things, the ring and the watch, were wrapped up together, and on the paper your name was legibly written in pencil, together with the date on which you left them with her. How observant you are! Raskolnikov smiled awkwardly, doing his very utmost to look him straight in the face, but failed, and suddenly added, I say that because I suppose there were a great many pledges, that it must be difficult to remember them all. But you remembered them all so clearly, and stupid, feeble, he thought. Why did I add that? But we know all who had pledges, and you are the only one who hasn't come forward. Porphyry answered with hardly perceptible irony. I haven't been quite well. I heard that too. I heard, indeed, that you were in great distress about something. You look pale still. I'm not pale at all. No, I'm quite well. Raskolnikov snapped out rudely and angrily, completely changing his tone. His anger was mounting. He could not repress it. And in my anger, I shall betray myself, flashed through his mind again. Why are they torturing me? Not quite well. Razumihin caught him up. What next? He was unconscious and delirious all yesterday. Would you believe, Porphyry, as soon as our backs were turned, he dressed, though he could hardly stand, and gave us the slip and went off on a spree somewhere till midnight. Delirious all the time. Would you believe it? Extraordinary. Really delirious. You don't say so. Porphyry shook his head in a womanish way. Nonsense. Don't you believe it? But you don't believe it anyway. Raskolnikov let slip in his anger. But Porfiry Petrovitch did not seem to catch those strange words. But how could you have gone out if you hadn't been delirious? Razumihin got hot suddenly. What did you go out for? What was the object of it? And why on the sly? Were you in your senses when you did it? Now that all danger is over, I can speak plainly. I was awfully sick of them yesterday. Raskolnikov addressed Porfiry suddenly, with a smile of insolent defiance. I ran away from them to take lodgings where they wouldn't find me, and took a lot of money with me. Mr. Zametov there saw it. I say, Mr. Zametov, was I sensible or delirious yesterday? Settle our dispute. He could have strangled Zametov at that moment. So hateful were his expression and his silence to him. In my opinion, you talked sensibly and even artfully, but you were extremely irritable, Zametov pronounced dryly. And Nikodem Fomitch was telling me today, put in Porfiry Petrovitch, that he met you very late last night in the lodgings of a man who had been run over. And there, said Razumihin, weren't you mad then? You gave your last penny to the widow for the funeral. If you wanted to help, give 15 or 20 even, but keep 3 rubles for yourself at least. But he flung away all the 25 at once. Maybe I found a treasure somewhere and you know nothing of it. So that's why I was liberal yesterday. Mr. Zametov knows I found a treasure. Excuse us, please, for disturbing you for half an hour with such trivialities, he said, turning to Porfiry Petrovitch with trembling lips. We are boring you, aren't we? Oh no, quite the contrary, quite the contrary. If only you knew how you interest me. It's interesting to look on and listen, and I'm really glad you have come forward at last. But you might give us some tea. My throat's dry, cried Razumihin. Capital idea. Perhaps we will all keep you company. Wouldn't you like something more essential before tea? Get along with you. Porfiry Petrovitch went out to order tea. Raskolnikov's thoughts were in a whirl. He was in terrible exasperation. The worst of it is they don't disguise it. They don't care to stand on ceremony. And how, if you didn't know me at all, did you come to talk to Nikodem Fomitch about me? So they don't care to hide that they are tracking me like a pack of dogs. They simply spit in my face. He was shaking with rage. Come, strike me openly. Don't play with me like a cat with a mouse. It's hardly civil, Porfiry Petrovitch, but perhaps I won't allow it. I shall get up and throw the whole truth in your ugly faces, and you'll see how I despise you. He could hardly breathe. And what if it's only my fancy? What if I'm mistaken and through inexperience I get angry and don't keep up my nasty part? Perhaps it's all unintentional. All their phrases are the usual ones, but there is something about them. It all might be said, but there is something. Why did he say so bluntly? With her. Why did Zametov add that I spoke artfully? Why do they speak in that tone? Yes, the tone. Razumihin is sitting here. Why does he see nothing? That innocent blockhead never does see anything. Feverish again. Did Porphyry wink at me just now? Of course, it's nonsense. What could he wink for? Are they trying to upset my nerves or are they teasing me? Either it's ill fancy or they know. Even Zametov is rude. Is Zametov rude? Zametov has changed his mind. I foresaw he would change his mind. He is at home here while it's my first visit. Porphyry does not consider him a visitor, sits with his back to him. They are as thick as thieves, no doubt, over me. Not a doubt, they were talking about me before we came. Do they know about the flat? If only they'd make haste. When I said that I ran away to take a flat, He let it pass. I put that in cleverly about a flat. It may be of use afterwards. Delirious indeed. He knows all about last night. He didn't know of my mother's arrival. The hag had written the date on in pencil. You are wrong. You won't catch me. There are no facts. It's all supposition. You produce facts. The flat even isn't a fact but delirium. I know what to say to them. Do you know about the flat? I won't go without finding out. What did I come for? But my being angry now, maybe, is a fact. Fool, how irritable I am. Perhaps that's right, to play the invalid. He is feeling me. He will try to catch me. Why did I come? All this flashed like lightning through his mind.